The Colorado Avalanche are trying to regroup after a disappointing playoff exit. It's been a busy offseason. Kyle Sullivan, the co-host of Locked On Avalanche, joins us to talk about whether or not the Avs are a better team now than they were at the end of last season. All that and more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome, everybody, to the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. And we are now available on SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just do a search for Locked On NHL. It is great to welcome back to the show the co-host of Locked On Avalanche, Shaggy Von Doom himself, Kyle Sullivan. And Kyle, disappointing playoff for the Avalanche. Injuries really hurting this team. We know Landeskog is not going to be back this year, and the Avs have been busy this offseason. What do you think so far has been the best move this team has made since the season ended?
I honestly, if you're going back and looking at the Avalanche team that won the Cup just 1 year removed, and you're looking at the moves that they have made this offseason, you can chalk every fiber of the moves that they made up to a win, because it is a commitment to a team grittiness that they did not have last year. And it showed with the injuries, like you brought up. This team, yes, they can outscore you. Yes, they can out-finesse you. They are fast, but they are fragile. And without Gabe Landeskog this year, you're without a captain. But every move they made, from Ryan Johansson to Miles Wood, Jonathan Drouin, and Ross Colton, like that alone, that sounds like almost like an all-star roster. Like you draft it in NHL 23, 24, and that's your fantasy roster. That's something it just makes Avalanche fans salivate for next year. But every justification from Chris MacFarland and Joe Sakic behind these moves is we need to get grittier, because that's a first-round bounce to the Seattle Kraken. Yes, it's embarrassing, but you see Vegas hoisting the cup, and that's a definition of a gritty team that won the cup. It was not so much the best team in the league. It was the team that was built to last. And you could see with Florida falling apart, they were not built to last. Vegas was, and Colorado is trying to replicate that.
That makes sense. And, certainly the physicality was lacking a little bit last season and into the playoffs. It looks like they're trying to address that. Are you a little bit concerned about what they gave up for the long term?
Honestly, not really. When you look at these moves, it's kind of tongue-in-cheek now in Avalanche circles. It's a typical Sakic move. Like, don't pick up the phone if it says Joe Sakic on the caller ID, because he's going to swindle you in one way or another. I think the biggest thing they let go would be Alex Newhook, and that's still a gamble. Montreal, in my opinion, just overpaid for Alex Newhook to be a member of the Montreal Canadiens for the next 4 years, and that contract is a borderline egregious for a wish and a prayer. He had the keys to the city last year in the 2C position that Jared Bednar himself said this is his to lose, and he ended the season on the fourth line. He started out the Stanley Cup season in the minors because he wasn't ready yet mentally for that role of a superstar on this team. The tools are there. He just can't put it together. And Montreal is taking a gamble at this. And for that to be a piece that you let up, and you had Nashville retain half of Ryan Johansson's salary to bring him in. Miles Wood, yes, it's one of the more expensive moves they made, but it's still not breaking the bank. And you're still taking a wish and a prayer on Johansson and Miles Wood because of their injury history. But you have Ross Colton and the project of Jonathan Drouin. There's a lot of things you can be excited about.
You talked about losing Landeskog and the leadership that goes along with that. Who do you think on this roster picks up the slack and becomes the new leader, at least for this season, on this team?
I think, honestly, this team It's understood this is a Nathan MacKinnon team, but this team has a very next man up mentality. Nathan MacKinnon might be the quote unquote leader, but this team answers to everybody. It's an accountability thing. It's not one guy directing. This is a Jared Bednar. He issues the order, he issues the lines, and they work as a unit. And you saw that the entire run of the Stanley Cup with Darren Helm as a playoff hero. It's not what you write out, but he was that guy. And you're going to expect that a lot, especially with these players that they brought in. They're sexy picks when it comes to production, but they fit exactly what the Avalanche want. And that's what they do. They run the Avalanche system. It's not so much a captain-led team, it's a unit.
Do you expect any more moves this offseason, or do you think this team is more or less set the way it's going to be?
See, and that's where you can catch me and Chris on Locked On Avalanche talking about this, because this is the great conundrum. Do the Avalanche go and fill out this roster with the little remaining league men talent? Do they call from within, from the Colorado Eagles, and finally get that system going? It's kind of been dead in the water for the past year or two. They need to get that going. Or do they just say, this is good for now, and then run it again at the trade deadline? That's where this team sits right now. As is, on paper, this team's good enough to be in the top part of the Central with Nathan MacKinnon, Mikko Rantanen, and Cale Makar. But we'll see what this offseason still holds. I didn't expect Ryan Johansson to be a member of the Colorado Avalanche, but Joe Sakic, he's good at making deals.
So as of right now, do you feel this team is better than they were a year ago, and by how much?
Well, as of right now, they haven't lost a game, so that's fantastic. But I would say, yes, this team is grittier. This team is there. Yes, it's more of a gamble on what you're getting injury-wise with their history. But if everybody is 100% healthy, you would be silly not to be very excited for what this team could put up.
Landeskog's future. I mean, we know he's not going to play this coming season. Is this potentially career-ending for him?
See, this is where you got the luck of the draw. If you would have got my co-host Chris Maselli, he holds out optimism that Gabe Landeskog is coming back. But I say, to quote the wise prophet Lee Corso, not so fast, my friend. This is not an injury you just rush back from. And this is 2 years of not NHL action. That's going to be hard to come back from. And I honestly, at the end of the day, when Landy finally gets healthy and starts that comeback, does his body allow him to make that comeback? Because that is a lot to get back to NHL playing shape and to be the leader of the Colorado Avalanche. And he's a father now. He has kids. He has other things to think about. And he's got to make that decision. And it's one of those things. I think he's better suited right now in a front office role when it's all said and done than coming back and leading the Colorado Avalanche.
Well, we'll see what the future holds for Gabriel Landeskog. Kyle, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you and your co-host on social media?
Oh, you can search Locked On Avalanche. We're on YouTube. You can see our smiling faces each and every day. You can find us on all the socials and follow Locked On NHL as well. One of us will pop in here every now and then.
And as far as your social media accounts?
Oh, if you want to follow me personally, you can find me at Shaggy Von Doom.
All right. Kyle, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Gil. It's always a pleasure.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting on Major League Baseball on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend on betting on everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think will hit the first home run. And no matter what Major League Baseball team you root for, you'll find great odds, props, and all kinds of other interesting bets on FanDuel. It's all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on Major League Baseball than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball.